So good afternoon. Welcome to St Patrick's this afternoon for one of our Food for Thought lectures. These were cancelled during the coronavirus, and we're just starting them again. And we are really pleased today to be able to begin with Dr Annmarie Hosie. Dr Annmarie practices here in the parish. I think she's got a very wonderful message for us. So we come together today and we acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Cadigal nation of the Orara people, and we acknowledge all of their traditions, their leaders, past, present, and to come. Dr Annmarie, as you can see on the board there, has a PhD. She has a master's in palliative care, aged care, and she's a registered nurse. She's an associate professor in palliative care and nursing at the University of Notre Dame and the St Vincent's Health Network, Sydney. There is some things on your card there that tell you a little bit about her and the background. I think it's a wonderful lecture that she's got for us this afternoon, and I hand over to her.
So, good afternoon, everyone. It's really good to be here, and especially to be here in person together. And thank you, Father Bob and Maria and Carla, for organising the talks, all of the talks and today's talk. And I just want to say Happy Father's Day to everyone in the room as well. And I think we have a father from St Peter Julian's as well with us too. And I also want to say Happy Father's Day to my dad, who lives in the Riverina. Can you hear me okay? If you have trouble hearing me, just give me a shout and I'll raise my voice. So I'm going to talk today on Christian love with respect to the area of my work, and which has been for many years for older people who are approaching the end of life. And Father Bob invited me to talk about this at the beginning of the year. I think it might have been January, February, and then sort of things have added some more poignancy to the topic, but I'm not going to focus on the pandemic today, even though the talk is relevant to it. And I just wanted to let you know, as you probably guessed, I'm Catholic, and I'm a registered nurse for over 30 years, and I'm now a research academic. But I'm talking to you today with my Annmarie hat on, so I'm going to try and merge my understanding of end-of-life care that I've learned about through my work and through reading and writing in the fields of palliative care, aged care, and the Catholic faith, and through lots of prayer. And I just wanted to say, if anything I say contradicts the teaching of the Church, I know Father Bob, or you'll set me straight. I'm relying on you to do that, because that's sort of my goal, is to live and to within the teachings of the Church, which is the truest sort of understanding of human life, I think, that we have. And I just wanted to say too that my job is actually about measuring things, and I love to measure things, but I think as a researcher we measure things maybe too much, and we actually can't measure love. It's immeasurable, but at the same time we can reason about love, because God's given us an intellect and He wants us to use it. So my prayer is that the talk integrates both reason and faith, and I wanted to use the words of St Paul, that we may have the power to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, so that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. That was from his letter to the Ephesians. Okay, so the structure of the talk. Okay, I think the structure is the next page. So the aim of the talk, I'm really hoping to inspire hope, joy, awe, and possibly even excitement about the end of life, and I really believe that's possible. So maybe you can let me know later if we've achieved that aim. So I'm going to just define or describe some key terms, and we're going to have two focus areas. It took me a while to work out the structure of this talk, and then I thought, well, what's a better way of doing it than to, according to the commandments, which is first of all our love of God, and secondly our love of neighbour, which are related. And then hopefully we'll have time for discussion. So it seems pretty straightforward. In some ways, I thought it was straightforward to define old age, but it's actually different. Around the world, but in Australia, we would say an older person is someone over 65 years, and or a person of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander background would be over 50 years, because their life expectancy is so much less compared to the rest of the Australian population. But if you look, it's Australia, Canada, and around the UK, and Denmark, those sorts of countries, we actually have the highest life expectancy. So in a country like Africa, an older person would be considered someone over 60. So it's all relative. And I thought it was interesting to think that we're actually all older than we were yesterday. So it is just relative. But about 15% of Australians are aged over 65. So if you look, there's some psychosocial theories about human development, and I think this is interesting sort of picture, and what it's saying is old age is about ego and integrity. Well, that's what we would try and achieve. That's a psychosocial model, Erickson's. But also the problems may be to do with despair. And I think this is it's sort of good to have a look at this. And this, I think all of us probably have experienced all the highs and lows of every stage of life there is. But if we're thinking about human development in Christian terms, I think this is an incomplete picture, because to be complete, you need the babe in the womb, and then at the end, I think you need a door. But this diagram is about psychosocial development. And then I looked up scripture. If ever I'm wondering what, I just Google, I think, what is scripture? What does the Bible say about topic? It's actually really helpful. And so they had some wonderful scripture on old age, and basically it's a time of glory, and there's a time of wisdom, and we were just talking, Mary was saying about grandchildren. So grandchildren are the crown of the aged, and the glory of children is their parents. And then I just put this separately because I thought it was so funny. It actually talks so much about grey hair. The glory of grey hair is the crown. And I thought, I suspect most of us don't think about grey hair in this way, but we probably should, because this is what scripture tells us. So I think I really liked what is said about grey hair. And if we look around who's in mass next time, and we look at the people with grey hair, we'll be amazed to see the glorified people that are in our midst. So it can also be a time of increased risk of illness. Not every older person has health conditions, but it becomes more likely, particularly the older we get. So I just wanted to put this diagram in, which I think is from 2013, and it just shows that the most common conditions of people over 65: cardiovascular disease, neurological conditions, which would include, I think, dementia, and things like Parkinson's disease, and respiratory diseases. And there's also people may have problems with their hearing and their vision. So frailty is a term we use a lot in medical terms, but it's actually not definitively defined, but it is of great interest in medicine, because it's recognised that it's an age-related syndrome where people become have diminished strength, diminished endurance, and reduced physiological function. and that can increase the person's vulnerability for developing increased dependence and death. So it's actually a syndrome that's not known about it in geriatric circles. But in lay terms, it's a condition of being weak and delicate. And for this talk, I mean frailty, both those sort of ways of understanding what frailty is, but I'm also thinking about frailty that arises directly from illness. And the only reason I didn't put illness in was made the title too long. So, and there's different measures for frailty, and so how many people are frail in older age is variable according to the measure, and it ranges as widely from 2% to 49% in Australia, but I think it's probably somewhere in between that, and in international studies about 10 to 14% of older people, and the older people get, the more common it is to be frail. So in lay terms, dying is to do with, connected with or at the time of death. And in both medical and lay language, I think dying refers to both that very, very end stage of life in the last few hours of days where we really know very clearly that the person is close to death. But dying can also be meant to understand the time from which you may get a diagnosis of a life-threatening illness and you understand that death is likely at some point. But Christians also understand dying to be a lifelong task of dying to oneself so that we can live in Jesus Christ and then for others. And that's something that happens through our baptism. It's a sacramental type of dying so that we can live in Jesus Christ. So I almost forgot to define palliative care because I'm so used to working in palliative care, but I thought I'd better define it because not everyone may have seen this definition, which is from the World Health Organization, and it's really well accepted all around the world since 2002. I'm going to read it out. There's more sort of descriptors that go with this definition, but it's quite long, but it's available online. But it's an approach that improves the quality of life of patients and their families facing the problems associated with life-threatening illness through the prevention and relief of suffering by means of early identification and impeccable assessment and treatment of pain and other problems, physical, psychosocial and spiritual. So it's a holistic approach to care. What I wanted to really flag, because I think we've got a little bit lost in our understanding of palliative care, even within palliative care circles, is that the end goal of palliative care is for fullness of life, even at the very end of life. It's not the goal of palliative care is not relief of suffering. That is the means by which you achieve, so someone can get on with what's important to them in their life and complete their business at the end of life. So that what I liken this to is if I have a headache, it interrupts my ability to focus on work. So I'll take some Panadol, headache goes away, and I'm just so glad because now I can get on with my work. I'm not glad of the absence of the headache, I'm glad because now I can function better and do what it is that I'm meant to do that day. So that's the distinction. But so many times when a student or someone write an article and reviewing it, and I say the goal of palliative care is relief of suffering, but it's actually the means to the goal of quality of life, which patients and family define as being able to attend to the tasks that are important to them. And the reason this is important is that you can reduce suffering, but you can reduce it to the extent that the person can no longer function. If you think you use too much pain relief, that people don't like that because they're groggy and drowsy and they can't do what they want to do. So this is why really impeccable assessment, really skilled use of interventions and looking at what is important to the person. And so what's death? And I think this is interesting as well because there's different ways of looking at this. I think I may be missing that page, so I'm going to have to. So in terms of medical definition, it's a cessation of all vital functions of the body. So whole brain activity, and heartbeat and breathing, which relies on the brain for those things to happen. What the church understands death to be is that definition, accepts that definition, but we also know it is the separation of the soul from the body. It's the end of our earthly life, and it's the beginning of our new life. And there's a great section in the Catechism where it's actually about death and dying, and that's 2005 to 2014. So if you want to have, I found it really helpful to look at that section. So death and eternal life, what we understand is that we say in the Creed that we believe in life everlasting. And we unite our own death to that of Jesus. And we view it as a step towards him and an entrance into everlasting life. And when the church, for the last time, speaks Christ's words of pardon and absolution over the dying Christian, seals for him for the last time with a strengthening anointing, and gives him Christ viaticum, I can't say that word well, as nourishment for the journey. She speaks with gentle assurance. Okay, this is my last definition. This is the best one. And the hardest one to define. Well, it's actually not a definition, I'm describing the qualities of Christian love. Well, really Christian love is modelled on Jesus Christ. And I just put down all the words I could think of about what Christian love is, and it's immense. So it's divine love in human form. It's Trinitarian. It's about mutual giving and receiving. It's selfless, sacrificial, saving. It wills the good of the other. It's pure. It's fruitful. It's tangible. We know it when it's present, but it's also measurable. It's hard. Sometimes, not always, but often hard. But it's made easy in Jesus Christ. It is the deepest meaning of our lives. It lives within us. Is the gift of the Holy Spirit, greatest theological virtue. It is never wasted, and it is eternal. Okay, so this slide, I'm really hoping I have notes here because I've just got this one slide on love of God. I just wanted to say that not all older people are frail, and dying can occur at any age. And I used those terms together when I was thinking about this talk because people with all of those circumstances are the focus of my work. So I think Father Barber said, come and talk about your work. But it took me a while to realise that these circumstances are, I think as I'm used to it, they're clear signs of our mortality. So I wanted them to just talk really, it's actually about love of God and love of neighbour at the end of life, and our Christian understanding of this love. So I thought, well, what does God want me to say about Christian love at the end of life? And it was surprisingly difficult. I don't know why. I'm used to having very structured presentations, and this is a bit of a different talk. But I realised it was important, after some reflection, that it was to talk about the reciprocal love during older age frailty and dying. Because in these circumstances, people don't just receive Christian love from others, they give it as well. And our temptation, I think, is sometimes to think we're caring for people who need our help, that we are doing all the giving, but that is not the case. It is a reciprocal giving and receiving. And most of all, though, Christian love at this time is about growing closer to God as we prepared to meet him face to face. And I kept thinking of this term, God's waiting room, which I think often is used to refer to nursing homes. And I think when we hear that term, it's sort of a negative thing. And then I thought, well, really, it'd be amazing to be in God's waiting room if you're wanting to see him. And I think, how are we thinking about places like nursing homes? How are we thinking about the end stage of our life? This is actually really important that we really go quite deeply and think, what is my views on this? What is my attitude to older people who are dying, the prospect of my own dying? Do we think about it with fear, or do we think about it with trust in God? And if we feel fear, what are we frightened of? And that's something I just wanted to give to people to sort of to reflect on, because the reason it's important is because the way we feel about these times, about people in these circumstances, will affect the way we are towards them. And I think the kingdom of God begins within us, and we can't give peace about dying to others unless we have it within ourselves. And the church encourages us, this is from the Catechism again, to prepare for the hour of our death. In the Litany of the Saints, and in the Rosary, and the Hail Mary, and to entrust ourselves to St. Joseph, who is the patron of a happy death. And what is love of God? Love of God is conforming ourselves to Him in the circumstances that He gives us each day. I was still striving, okay, what is love of God? But then in the Divine Office this morning, my question was answered, because St. Leo the Great said, for to love God is nothing else than to love righteousness. So I think it's moral, what is morally right, and I think also what is real, what is happening right now. But what I wanted to share at this point is that by working in palliative care, and I was thinking back to my time at the bedside, and that was in aged care facilities, in people's homes, private homes and in hospitals, what I've learned that every person's death and dying is unique. It makes sense, and it has meaning for that individual person, even if we only recognise retrospectively how it has meaning and makes sense. We may not understand at the time, but it always makes sense. And this time of life contains all the highs and lows that the rest of life does. It is not all suffering, and openness to the circumstances allows joy to enter as well. So death and dying is really hard work, isn't it? I read this great quote. Betty Davis said, older age is not for sissies. And I thought, it's not. Got to be tough for it. But they're also, so death and dying is also, it's awesome, it's profound, and it's mysterious, and it's usually grief-ridden. Even with our faith, we're going to get knocked by grief. But there's also lots of laughter, and there's reconciliation, forgiveness, and sort of everyday ordinariness about death and dying. And I wanted to share with you that I have glimpsed bliss on the faces of dying people, and it was always unexpected. It was always, I was just be turning the person, and I'd look down, and it was bliss. And then I thought, how often do we see bliss? Hardly ever. I've seen it 3 times, I think. Twice was on faces of dying people. One lady I had never met or talked to, she could no longer talk, and I was just doing a shift on the ward, and she was in a state of bliss. So I knew what it was when I saw it, and it was awesome. And you can just sort of wonder, what is this person seeing? And I think they are seeing what we cannot see. So that's what I just wanted to share, that some of those what I've learned from caring for the dying. So love of neighbour, second commandment. I wanted to include the love of the person who's dying for us, for others, and then the love of us towards the person who's dying. So I'll start with the love that people give to us at this time, and it's in so many ways. And I'm going to tell you a story about a man who I looked after in aged care many years ago. So what people do at this time is they often are caring for family members, for others, of grandchildren, like Mary was saying, this loving care of grandchildren, sort of a safe, often a very safe love for those children. They have often more time to listen, wise counsel. They teach us through their example, through altruism. And so my work is in research in palliative care, and it's incredible. So many people who are dying will want to participate in studies so that they can give something to others, and it gives them a wonderful sense of contribution to others. People also do this for reasons of legacy for their children and grandchildren and for others. And they help us to see, they help us by accepting help from others. Because when you accept help from others, you are allowing that person, you're helping that person in their salvation, and also giving them a job to do as well. They help us through their prayer and through redemptive suffering. So I've got a picture of, it's not very clear, it's of the Last Supper. And I just wanted to share this story. It's been with me for years. I think I might have written to someone once about this story. It's the first time I've shared it. So I worked in an aged care facility in the Illawarra, wasn't a Catholic organisation. And I worked as a care coordinator in a low care facility. It's 2006, 2009. It was probably one of the hardest jobs I ever did in terms of busyness, and I was much thinner then because I was running the whole time, and it was a really fun, crazy, difficult place to work, but very, very rewarding. And I wanted just to say about aged care facilities, they are a microcosm of society. There's like romance and plotting and love and all sorts of things that go on in aged care. It's really amazing places, amazing people, and diversity of people. But there was a man whose name, he lived in the aged care facility, and his name was Paul. He had mental and physical health issues, and he used a wheelchair because he'd lost a leg. He was usually very polite. His mental illness was quite stable, but he would also speak very frankly with us if he was upset about it. He was a very straightforward, genuine, nice man. And back then I was actually away from the church, and I was away from the church since I was 18. I'll sort of tell you a little bit about how I came back, but I wasn't practicing faith, and I didn't take much notice of other people's faiths either. I was blind to things like that, but now I realise he was devoutly Catholic. And one of my colleagues, who I now realise also was Catholic, she'd found this large frame print of a painting of the Last Supper in a storeroom, and she knew Paul would love it. So, but for some reason, she gave it to me to give to him rather than giving it to him directly. She did that on purpose. He was really delighted with this painting, and he hung it over his bed. And in a short time later, he developed a wound. And I didn't really go in his room much before that, but I had to go in his room to do the dressing. And then every time I dressed his wound, I'd be entirely focused on it. He would steer the conversation to the painting, and he would invite me to look up at it. And he loved it, and he would say how grateful he was for it. And I would just sort of glance up at it and then get back to the dressing. And I just didn't engage. I would listen to him, but I didn't really get it. And then when I resigned from that position in 2009, I was starting a new role at Calvary Hospital. Before I left, Paul came to the office and he gave me his rosary beads. And I was really moved by that. And and then he was insistent, so I took them and I treasured these rosary beads and I kept them with me, but I didn't pray them. I just knew they were very special to have these rosary beads. And then in 4.5 years later, I had this sudden, unexpected conversion on a train in Belgium, and found a book on Mary, and someone gave me a card on praying the rosary within about a week later, and I started praying the rosary and I've prayed the rosary every day since that time, and I came back to the church within a couple of weeks after starting to pray the rosary. So I now know that, so Paul has now died, but I know he was instrumental in my awakening. I feel that so strongly. He did, and I don't know how he knew I was Catholic, but I think he spotted it. But I feel so strongly that this man, hidden away in a nursing home, was very powerful, loved. So our love for others is actually, first of all, do no harm, and this is about our thinking and our ways of being. And so the ways of thinking about older people, this is why I was saying it's so important to really think deeply about how we view older age, how we view dying, because it will reflect how we are to others, how we think about them. And there is a real movement in the world to think of people who are older, frail, dying, disabled, as less worthy. That is very present in the world. And then that leads to things like neglect and abuse and euthanasia. So I don't want to talk too much about euthanasia, but I couldn't do a talk about dying without mentioning it. But what we know, the definition, and the best definition for euthanasia is by St. Pope John Paul II, the deliberate act or omission which directly and intentionally causes the death of a person for the purposes of eliminating suffering. So voluntary euthanasia is at the person's request, involuntary is without the person's request, and it is usually through the administration of a lethal dose of medication. I'll come back to this way of killing through medication very briefly, but so help people think at length about this, because it's often considered to be a gentle way of dying, and it's not. So, and also I wanted to say euthanasia is commonly positioned as a compassionate act, or one that respects the autonomy of the person who's requesting it, but it actually stems in the modern day from the eugenics movement, where people, certain groups of people were considered to be not worthy, less than human, not worthy of living. That's actually where it stems from. Physician-assisted suicide, all different terms for these things, and in Australia, Victoria's voluntary assisted dying, there's no consensus on terminology or definitions. But physician-assisted suicide is where the person helps by providing the prescription, the lethal prescription, to the person at their person's request. And in countries where both physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia are legal, and I tend to call all of this euthanasia, almost all acts are intentional deaths are caused by euthanasia. So this is all of this data. I didn't go looking for new data for this talk because I don't think things have changed too much. And as a person working in palliative care, I deliberately don't spend too much time reading about euthanasia. I know it's wrong, and our palliative care is the opposite of that. So we can get very distracted and taken off course if we spend our time battling this, but we have to battle it. So what it found, this is in Belgium, and what it found was that when about over a quarter of deaths actually happened without the person's consent. So people have become so used to this in the ICU, they don't ask people what they want. It's just given. So because of this, and this slippery slope really, it definitely happens. And other areas where euthanasia is legal, what happens? This is just another way of demonstrating the proportion of people who were killed without their consent through involuntary euthanasia in Belgium, 2013. So in countries where it's legal, what's happening is increasing proportions of death by euthanasia, and that includes of disabled infants and people in intensive care units who have no say in the matter. Also of elderly people euthanized against their will, and studies report doctors and nurses are confused about the differences between palliative care and euthanasia. There's been studies from Canada that show the cost savings that will occur through doctor-assisted suicide will bring to the Canadian health system, and they're serious academic works. And also there's a movement towards having body parts removed for donation in the process of euthanasia. And that is also being seriously written about in the academic literature. And I think it doesn't reflect the majority viewpoint, but it's certainly, this is about this people being not worthy and doing things that the ends don't justify the means. So the euphemisms, and I'll move on soon, but they are in Canada is medical aid in dying, Victoria voluntary assisted dying, mercy killing is another euphemism, compassion and choices is one group, death with dignity, and Go Gentle Australia, which is they're all organisations to promote, and they don't all agree. They do actually have very different viewpoints, but the actual meaning of those terms is mercy is actually to enter into mercy. What God gives to us, enter into the chaos of our lives, and then you lift up the person. You don't stay down there in the chaos. Actually, what you are doing is healing and lifting the person. That's mercy. Compassion means to suffer with. You can't suffer with someone by eliminating them. And dignity is about, this is from the Catechism, it is rooted in the creation of the human person in the image and likeness of God and fulfilled in our vocation to divine beatitude. And gentle means moderate in action, effect, degree, not strong or violent. And you cannot gently kill someone. Because if you're going to give something to someone or do something to someone to kill them, you are doing violence to their body and to their functioning. You have to, because otherwise you won't be able to kill them. And to give these medications, the person may not be able to express the distress that it causes, but it is a violent act towards human person. It is not a gentle death, even though it may appear that way, but it doesn't always appear that way either, from some of the literature about what can go wrong. So that's what I wanted to say about euthanasia. I find it such a incredibly almost incomprehensible that we've come to this point. The Church on Euthanasia is involuntary euthanasia, intentional euthanasia, whatever its forms or whatever its motives, is murder, is gravely contrary to the dignity of the human person and to the respect due to the living God, his creator. And we know, it was in the I think it's the fifth commandment, thou shalt not kill. So I think we just sort of know this, and it's almost like, why are we even having to debate it? We just know natural law, we know through their faith it is a wrong act. So what should we be doing? And that is, we should be doing good. And in terms of our ways of thinking and seeing as God does, which is the infinite worth of every person. And that is not related to the person's function or their contribution they make to society. It is every single person. And from the moment of life begins till its end. So this is, what I found was when I came back to the faith was, I'd never ever thought euthanasia was right. I always knew it was wrong. But all of a sudden when I came back to the faith, I was like this amazingness to see people. It was like I saw people properly in their true colours for the first times, walking along the street or when you go to Mass. It was in the diversity of people, how beautiful people are, and every single person made in the image of God, which tells you, and if you think everyone looks so different, tall, short, it's just incredible how we are all made in the image of God and we're all so different, unique. So this is the gift we've been given, just to see people in this way, whatever their circumstances. And so what are ways of acting? And there's nothing simpler than the works of mercy. And I found this beautiful quote from Pope Francis: in a world which unfortunately has been damaged by the virus of indifference, the works of mercy are the best antidote. And so I was being lazy at this point. I just found this picture. And then what I love about the works of mercy is they're so simple. And God is simple, and we make things complicated. these are just the fundamental things people need, and this is how we get to heaven. Doing these simple things, giving someone a drink of water who needs it, feeding the hungry. And I always think about these things. I think about the patient in the hospital. This, when I apply these in my own mind, I think about it in terms of caring for a patient. So everyone in this room would know about the works of mercy, the corporal works, the bodily works of mercy, and then the spiritual works of mercy. And things like visit the imprisoned, I think, well, that is, it's not a prison. Nursing home's not a prison, but people can feel very trapped by their circumstances and not in when they're unable to go out. So Chris was saying about taking people out. One of his jobs was to take people out who lived in a nursing home, so you go out and about, day trips, and that's a work of mercy, and is so simple. So spiritual works of mercy. This is all things we can do for people at the end stage of life as well, and they happen, I think, in this terms of forgiveness and reconciliation with people in their families and with God. This really happens, and we're asked to pray for the living and the dead. I've almost come to the end, and that palliative care is considered a work of mercy. Disinterested, special form of disinterested charity. I have to say, palliative care is not perfect. It's healthcare like other healthcare that we just don't get right 100% of the time. It does not relieve all suffering, but it can really help. It has helped so many people. So what my goal is that we do keep doing this better. And really, what do people want at the end of life? What do they value? And that's also really simple. And some of these are to do with the area of my work, which is around maintaining people's cognition or their thinking when they're very sick. But patients really value being mentally aware. They want to be safe. They want to have the sense of themselves and their relationship with others. And they want to be able to pray. The one about being able to pray was an American study, really high up on the list. I've not seen that finding in Australia. So I don't think, but I'll let you know some of the research into spirituality in palliative care is that patients and family, to them, it is about hospitality. It's not about religion, but they feel the spiritual needs are taken care of when the place that they're in and the way they're treated is hospitable, caring. So that's also, it's how simple this is. And what families value, they want to be given information. They want us to respect the person and their subjective experience, and they want us to address suffering in ways that don't disrupt communication. They want to maintain that relationship while the person is still with them. So I just wanted, this is the last slide, I think, or second last slide, in terms of what I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into my research is that one of the major things I'm doing is that we took these strategies, which is about fundamental care, meeting people's basic needs for eating, drinking, communication, stimulating the mind, moving, sleeping well, seeing and hearing. They are actually, if you deliver those things to people in hospital, outcomes are so much, they're better. And my area of research is delirium, which is where an acute change in mental status, which arises from a physiological imbalance. And if you put these things in place in hospitals in a systematic way, you cut the rate of delirium by 1/3. So you can't prevent all delirium because it's also from illness, but you can really reduce it by making sure people get enough to eat, drink, move around, sleep. So we did a pilot trial on 4 palliative care units in 2017-18, and we wanted just to see, can we do this with people who are very much at the end of their life? It was with people with advanced cancer. And we found that we could, and it was The only drawback of this study was the clinicians were very, very keen and they did this, but didn't document it particularly well. But even though the documentation, we're going to figure out ways of making it easier for people, even in this small study, which we need to test in a larger study, same rate of improvement in delirium at 7 days. So there was less delirium for the patients who received the intervention than people for the sites that didn't. So this is my next challenge, is to get funding for a bigger trial. So this is the last slide. So the source of all that we do, the love that we give, this doesn't come from us. And Andrew and I were just talking before about how, you know, we get pretty tired pretty quick if we didn't have grace. So the source of all love comes from God. And I just found, and this was in, I think this was in the Divine Office as well. This morning. Therefore prophesy and say to them, thus says Lord God, I am going to open your graves and bring you up from your graves, O my people, and I will bring you back to the land of Israel. And you shall know that I am the Lord, when you open your graves and bring you up from your graves, O my people. I will put my spirit within you, and you shall live, and I will place you on your own soil. Then you shall know that I, the Lord, have spoken and will act, says the Lord. And I thought that was sort of fitted what this talk was about today. It was about our hope of life after death. So that's it. So I really welcome a discussion of people's thoughts about anything that we've talked about or anything related that we haven't talked about today. Thank you.
Thank you, Annmarie. Does anybody have a question? Does anybody like to ask a question?
I'd just like to make a comment, actually, but just share something I heard. Thank you. It was very most enjoyable. Something I heard last week, a woman who died last week, and she'd always been a very wonderful contributor to the parish, and had done a lot of pastoral care and helped out. But she put herself into an aged care facility at a certain age. She had that autonomy, and she said, I want to go to learn to die well. And she'd always lived well, but obviously she was getting aged. And I thought that was a very interesting observation, that she would learn to die well.
Yeah.
And apparently she did.
Right. Yeah, I think it actually is something we consciously work out how we're going to do this in the right way. And these are learning, and we don't know what the learning will be until we come to the time either. So it can be quite uncertain, but there's some great, very old works around how to die well from the Catholic faith. I can't remember the names of the saints who wrote these, but there's some sort of like basically the art to dying well is to living a good life, it doesn't mean death's easy. It often isn't, but there is we can pray for the grace of a happy death. But I think it's almost like we've got to practice it every day.
I do think that then comments on what we were talking about euthanasia. I do think it's a very troubled area because some people are in very, very difficult circumstances. So
yeah. It is, but I think it is not the right. How do you help someone by killing them? And it is not our place to kill someone. It is not our role. It is not it is not a healthcare professional's role to do that. It's become very muddied, but it's murder to kill someone, and it's just, I suppose it's an absolute wrong. That's what our faith is, absolute wrong. Even if the motives are compassionate. It's very hard to be with a suffering person. And we absorb a lot of the suffering. So sometimes I think it's just that we get worn out with it ourselves. But so much of why people request it is because they fear. And they fear being a burden. And I've had so many patients say to me, I don't like being a burden on you, on my family. But how we think about this is crucial, because the person is not a burden, they're a gift. The fact we can do something for someone, we've just been given a gift. And if we can turn people's, you are a gift to me, not a burden. That's what we have to help people to see. No one is a burden. And this is why you say, oh, we can't have more people being born because they're a burden. No one is a burden. Everyone is a gift, no matter how much help they need. So I think we've got to be really careful with our compassion, because we can be taken off on the wrong track through our compassion.
When people are going to palliative care, sometimes they find themselves in a position of person
Can you speak up?
will find themselves in a position where they become ill very quickly, and so they'll go off to hospital, to emergency, whatever. And in my, what's happened to me in my life, caring for someone, that person, unless they've got an advocate,
Yes.
and myself or family being the advocate for that person, they don't know that person's life. They look at that person
Is critically ill.
they're critically ill.
Yeah.
And if you can't say, hang on, yesterday that person was hiking
Yeah.
in the mountain.
Yes.
The strategy is, that person cannot get out of this.
Yeah.
So you always must be there for that person. Everyone needs an advocate
Yes.
beside them to help them then you go down the path of dying or get out of that situation and get the help that's required.
Yeah,
so that it sort of falls in everyone needs someone beside them.
Yes. Like a guard.
In that position.
Yes. To advocate for their life.
Advocate for their life or pleasant ending to it.
Yeah. I think what it is, a bit of a tendency is that we look at, okay, the person's diagnosis, they're so sick, they're this age, therefore we just, and this is something I think in palliative care we've gone too far in terms of being sometimes too hasty, or too thinking, oh well, but people regularly surprise you, regularly get better from, especially when the condition is something where it's up and down a lot. But I notice it's the people who don't have the advocates who I worry about, and they are the ladies in their 90s who have got only a niece in Melbourne, and they are the men who are divorced and estranged from their families. They're the sort of, that's sort of generalising, but that's what I always feel concerned for those people, because there's no one there. Daughters, stroppy daughters are a really good gift to elderly parents, and they really bug staff and nurses, but you need a stroppy daughter, someone who's really going to fight. And an example is I wasn't involved in this case until afterwards, but there was a man in a nursing home who had dementia. It wasn't advanced dementia. He was a big, hardy guy, and he stopped eating. And the care staff were not trained nurses. A lot of care staff have done a lot of training, and they really didn't look into it. And he went for days and days without eating. And in the end, someone picked up he had a whole mouth ulcers. And he went to hospital. They treated his mouth ulcers, and he was able to eat. But they had confused him not being able to eat with being connected to the dementia. But he wasn't in that late stage of dementia where that happens. So that does happen in late stage dementia, but he wasn't in that. So it's very easy to overlook reversible causes unless you have that. And so the reason I got called in, the roles in, was 2 or 3 daughters who were incredibly angry at the aged care facility, really cross, and the care coordinator, I think, just called me in for moral support because she was just her, and so but the daughters were right. Maybe they weren't right in the way they were expressing it to the care coordinator, but they were right that it was an overlooking of what could be done for him.
As I understand it, there's a huge gap between the number of people who can experience palliative care as opposed to those who want or need it. Can you see any likelihood of any improvement in that situation in the, say, short to medium term?
I think one of the things I believe is about integration of palliative care in different clinical areas, rather than having because there's a specialist palliative care teams, but they can't see one, and their role really should be for complex cases. And I suppose any healthcare professional who and then should know about how to care for the dying and relieve symptoms at a fundamental sort of level. And so a lot of people, they won't need to have a referral to a specialist palliative care service because their needs are fairly straightforward, and their needs. So the way it's shifting now is thinking, okay, it should be needs based. What does that person need? But there are groups of people who are underserved, and that is the elderly, people living in aged care, and prisoners, and people with disabilities. In Australia, we've actually got one of the best palliative care in the world. I think we rank 2nd in the world, and many parts of the world they can't even access basic pain relief and things like that. So there is a lot of work going on to address that inequity, and it will never be perfect. But I think I just remember one of the first people I saw die was a 2nd year out of nursing, and I was working in a high dependency unit, and I just met this patient lady this morning who wasn't very well, and she died. And I was completely shocked. I had no idea she was going to die, and it was probably expected, but we weren't in that thinking mode, and I didn't know enough about death and dying at that point. And I remember, we called her family in, and I had no idea what to say to them. All I could do was get them a cup of tea, and I was just completely clueless about where she was at, what to do. So I think there's movement to integrate palliative care into undergraduate curriculum, but it's not equal treatment. So there's awareness of that.
I just wonder what the situation is. I know you're not talking about the pandemic, but the pandemic has highlighted the terrible things that go on in aged care. And I'm just wondering how the people that work in palliative care and the relationship with these nursing homes, like what is that relationship like if this terrible stuff is going on?
Yeah, it's variable, and one of my roles was actually to go out to aged care facilities in a region of Sydney, and there was 64 facilities in that area, and I worked out that really this is about relationship, me making the connections with the staff. I would go and see the person that asked me to see, and then talk to the GP, talk to the staff about putting a plan in place. But not every facility wanted me there, not every facility would refer, some just didn't want palliative care, we do it ourselves. Others would call you all the time, it was like too much, because they wanted to just hand it over. This thing about death and dying, people don't, it's like, it's too hard sometimes for people, they just want to hand it over. So, but there's new models of care in aged care now. Some parts, and some of my colleagues do this work where they actually go regularly out to the facility. They sit with the team and they say who are they, and they sort of almost do like a discussion of what people's needs are and how that might be addressed. But what that does is empowers the aged care staff to recognise the person's need and then to actually put the care in place, rather than palliative care teams coming in like, we tend to be rescuers, and we've got that tendency, and it's something we've got to be careful of. We're actually meant to empower. the carers. And so that's, I think, a really good model. But what I was going to say was, I've seen the best palliative care in aged care facilities, even without my involvement. But I've seen some of the best care I've ever seen in some, and I've seen the worst care. And it's to do with the person running the place, and a good person will transform the team, the culture, and you know, who's given some. I think we've got all these young nurses from Nepal, and they're caring for our elderly people, you know, and they do, there's so much good that goes on, but it's so variable, and I don't know what the answer is, except I think we need more Christians. Yeah. We need grace. So Venerable Mary Potter, one of her lines was, "We need Christians at the bedside of dying people." Yeah. Catholics, we need Catholics there. You know, this is really important, and they are there. But I think it's, I just know this is beyond our capabilities to do well without grace.
I think theologically the focus that I was just reading about St. Philip Neri this morning, and he was, you know, his welcoming of his entry into eternal life.
Right.
And I also know somebody who's over 100 who is saying, my bags are packed, but the taxi's not here. You know, with this great expectation and
longing.
You can't just suddenly kick into that frame of mind at the point of death.
No.
It's like you have to live this your whole life for that to be a reality.
Yeah.
I think.
And it's not that we're looking forward to death, we're actually looking forward to what's on the other side. Yeah. Meeting God face to face. We've got to get through that time. But I agree, it's got to think about it.
So maybe there's some education needed, you know, in religious instruction in the schools or whatever.
Yes.
You know, sort of, to attempt to have discussions around that.
Yes. There's all these things going on, there's death cafes and things, but I worry about them a bit if they're not got the message of eternal life, because I think one time I was thinking, unless we know that, we can raise fear and anxiety, I think, by talking about death a lot. So there's quite a lot of social movements and stuff about, you know, these death cafes, and I don't know about that, but you know, I don't know the evidence around it, so I can't make a judgment. But I do worry sometimes without the Christian message, then people can become very fearful, and then they start saying, "Well, I want this, I want that. If I get like this, then please knock me off, you know, because I don't want anyone having to do this for me." This is sometimes what I think. I wonder whether this movement around advanced care planning has actually raised people's. I think there's good things about it, but I wonder if it's raised people's anxiety as well. So the whole thing is about not being frightened, trusting in God. But if without that, it would be really scary. I think, anyway, I'm not sure, but
okay. We thank you, Annmarie, for sharing your experience and knowledge with us, and you know, it's quite invaluable.
Thank you very much. I think.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Carla. I can't remember to say thank you, Carla. Yes, for organising.
Yeah, and we usually hold this on the first Sunday of the month, and just you get an update from the bulletin, you know, what the topic would be, and we publish the topic during that time. Okay.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.